Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Owning your own home has become something of a British obsession. But research by the Resolution Foundation suggests that for many, it's never going to happen. And the problem, once limited to London and the South East, now extends well beyond. In Greater Manchester, the West Midlands and South and West Yorkshire, home ownership is at its lowest in 30 years. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Darshna Soni, reports from Sheffield.
So yeah, it's very hard, but yeah, you do worry about him.
Paula Hudson has lived here in Sheffield for 13 years, but she worries that her daughter Olivia will struggle to ever own her own home.
I'd like her to be able to, you know, to have her own house, but I think she just knows that to get her own house, she's going to have to save for it.
First-time buyers are increasingly relying on their parents to help them with deposits. But for Olivia, who's studying to become a nurse, that's not an option.
I haven't got that money, so saving-wise, because the money that I earn, we pay out.
It would be nice, obviously, to own a house knowing like it's your own house.
Do you think it's getting harder then for people your age?
Yeah, I think it is.
She's by no means alone. Across the country, the number of people who can afford to buy their own place is falling.
We're used to hearing about how hard it is to get on the property ladder in London, but it's now happening in cities across England. Here in Sheffield, home ownership is at its lowest level since the early 2000s. More and more people say they're having to rent as house prices become detached from people's earnings. So, is it now time to change our attitude towards owning a property?
Here in Yorkshire and in the West Midlands and Greater Manchester, home ownership has fallen from around 70% to below 60% since 2003.
In 2003, the average was just over 90,000, and now it's just over 150,000.
Estate agent Bob Brown says house prices are now completely out of step with average wages, and his clients can no longer rely on easy credit and 100% mortgages.
One thing is that we've got a transient workforce as well that we have to take into consideration, and their lifestyle. So people will rent first to see if they're going to keep at the job. And because they've got short-term contracts as well, that's helping things as well. But most of all, we need to build some affordable housing.
It's that shortage of affordable housing that's contributing to the crisis. On the Scotia Road estate, Councillor Jane Dunn shows me around the site where the council is building 51 new family homes. They're one of the few remaining authorities still managing to build. Many blame Margaret Thatcher's controversial Right to Buy scheme introduced in 1980.
The biggest problem we have with Right to Buy is the fact that the profit goes to the Treasury.
Right.
So the councils in Sheffield we can't reinvest it. It's really worrying because I can see this going to increase homelessness eventually.
As home ownership has gone down, private renting has gone up, a shift that can impact living standards and future wealth, which may have implications for us all.
Darshna Soni reporting there. Well, I'm joined now by Guardian columnist Dawn Foster and the chairman of the National Landlords Association, Carolyn Uphill, who's in Manchester. Dawn Foster, does this matter? If so, why does it matter?
I think it does matter for a number of reasons. First of all, young people find that their wages are way, way, way lower than their living costs at the moment. I mean, I live in London, I don't own a home. I earn much more than the national average, but I have no chance of doing so, neither do my friends. But then when I travel around the country and meet other people and write about them, I meet people in Sheffield who are my age or older, who are really, really struggling to afford to rent and therefore cannot afford to buy a home. The problem with that then is that they have no security. So people have no job security, then they have no home security. So I'm increasingly meeting a lot of people who can't even start a family, can't begin to think about getting married, let alone having children, and then we end up in a complete rental trap with...
I mean, Caroline Uphill, the decline in home ownership would matter less, the Resolution Foundation suggests, if it weren't for the fact that the private rented sector, in their view, is not fit for purpose.
Well, I don't agree with that at all. Obviously, there are some rogues in the sector, but they are a very small minority. The vast majority of private landlords are providing stable and good quality homes, and the vast majority of tenants are happy with those properties. There's been a year-on improvement, as evidenced by the English Housing Survey, that standards are improving in the private rented sector, and we hope those are going to continue.
The Resolution Foundation says, unlike in other areas in Europe, rents are incredibly high, taking up a huge proportion of many people's earnings and their income, and that tenancies are very, very insecure in some instances.
Well, we have to concentrate on the actual problem here, which is there is a chronic shortage of housing supply, which has pushed housing prices up. Rents reflect that the purchase prices of houses are very, very high, and we hear talk of no security of tenure, and yet again the English Housing Survey evidences that the average tenancy is now lasting for 4 years. So that seems to be fairly stable to me, particularly when you take into account that that's an average over a rental sector that's accommodating students who only usually stay for a year. So there are many people who stay for much longer than the 4 years.
Dawn Foster, private rented sector is working very well. That's not the issue.
That's not my experience, and not the experience of millions of people in the UK. Homelessness has increased massively, and a large part of that is due to private rental evictions. There are 100,000 children at the moment who are in temporary accommodation because they've been evicted from private rental properties. And you know, even if the average tenancy is 4 years, that means that a lot of people are in much shorter tenancies. I meet endless families who are in terrible accommodation with mould, etc., and their landlord will not do anything because they know that the power lies with the landlord. A lot of people I know would be very, very happy to rent if they had more rights, but they simply don't.
Carolyn Uphill?
Actually, only 7% of tenancies are ended by the landlord. The majority of those are for rent arrears, and the majority are ended by the social sector. Most private landlords want to keep good, reliable paying tenants. It's absolutely not the case that the landlords want short-term tenancies. They want long-term, reliable tenants.
Carolyn Uphill, do you accept the issue about high rents, though? Figures from Shelter suggest that tenants are paying around half their take-home pay in rent. In London, that's up to 3/4 of their take-home pay. I mean, that is non-sustainable, isn't it?
Rents are very high in London. They actually have been quite stable, again, as evidenced by the English Housing Survey throughout the rest of the country, but they reflect housing prices. The real problem here is a shortage of supply, and the problems will not be overcome until governments get their head around the need to build a great many more homes for people right across all types of tenure.
I mean, the response is always that we need to build more houses. Presumably you agreed with that?
Yes, completely. But I think we have to look at what houses we build. I think we need a lot more social housing, a lot more affordable housing, so that people can rent socially, have much more rights, and you know, and live in a actual sustainable community, rather than constantly subsidising private landlords, which is what Housing Benefit does.
Dawn Foster, Carolyn Uphill, I'm really sorry we'll have to end it there. Thank you very much. Thank you.